Good morning. I am certainly delighted to stand before you this morning on such a momentous occasion. Giving honor to God, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who is the head of my life, to this wonderful dynamic pastor, the Reverend Timothy Fleming, to all of the ministers of the gospel, to all of you who have assembled here this morning. I promise not to be before you long this morning, but while I am here, I would like to leave a few words with you as it pertains to the dream. 50 years ago, we were in Washington, D.C., and we were marching for jobs and freedom. Now, half a century later, we're still dealing with realizing the American dream. And so, you know, America is essentially a dream. It is a dream of a land where men of all races, of all nationalities, of all creeds can live together as brothers. The substance of this dream is expressed in these profound words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, one of the first things that we notice about this dream is its amazing universalism. It does not say some men, but it says all men. It doesn't say all white men, but it says all men, which includes black men. It does not say all Jews, but it says all men, which includes Gentiles. It does not say all Protestants, but it says all men, which includes Catholics. There's something else that we notice about this dream, which is one of the amazing things that distinguishes democracy and our form of government with other totalitarian systems. It says that there are certain basic rights that are neither conferred by nor derived from the state. In order to discover where they came from, we must move back behind the dim mist of eternity. They are God-given. And very seldom, if ever in the history of the world, has a socio-political document expressed in such profound, eloquent, and unequivocal language the dignity and the worth of human personality. For the American dream reminds us that every man is the heir of a legacy of dignity. Yet ever since the founding fathers of our nation dreamed this dream, America has been, to use a big word, as the psychologists and the psychiatrists use, a schizophrenic personality, classically divided. On one hand, she has proudly professed the noble principles of democracy, and on the other hand, she has sadly practiced the very opposite of those principles. Indeed, slavery and segregation have always been strange paradoxes in a nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal. So often America has trampled over the dream. So often America has scarred this noble dream. We look and see certain states saying that they will never comply with the law of the land. This is a way of scarring the dream. We notice people who merely want to be free, being brutalized, homes being bombed, churches being bombed. This is a way of scarring the dream. We notice people who merely want to exercise their citizenship rights being thrown into jail. This is a way of scarring the dream. We can hear the voice of a little Emmett Till crying from the rushing waters of Mississippi. This is scarring the American dream. And so the Negro is still trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. And so often he has been pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July and left standing in the piercing chill of an alpine November. This is scarring the American dream. And so I say to you, as has been said so eloquently all the afternoon, this dream is being scarred not only in South Carolina, Louisiana, Georgia, and all the southern states. It is being scarred in New York and Philadelphia and Chicago, and I imagine even in California. The fact is, the Negro all over America is still the last hired and the first fired, and he still can't live where his money can get him to live. And so often America continues to scar this noble dream. But while we are talking about the dream, we need to understand that first, in order to make the American dream a reality, we must seek to make the world dream a reality, and therefore we must begin with a world perspective. We must begin with a unified perspective. Now, it is true that the geographical oneness of this age in which we live came into being to a large extent through man's scientific ingenuity. Man, through his scientific genius, has been able to dwarf distance and place, time and change. Yes, we've been able to carve highways through the stratosphere. Now jet planes have compressed into minutes distances that once took days. Bob Hope had described this new jet age in which we live, and I think he gave an adequate description. He says it was an age in which it was possible to take a non-stop flight from Los Angeles to New York, and if on taking off in Los Angeles you develop hiccups, you will hick in Los Angeles and cup in New York City. Now, you know it is possible because of the time difference to take a flight from Tokyo, Japan on Sunday morning and arrive in Seattle, Washington the preceding Saturday night. And when your friends meet you at the airport and ask when you left Tokyo, you would have to say, I left tomorrow. Now, this is a bit humorous, but I'm trying to laugh a basic fact into all of it, and it is simply this. Through our scientific genius, we made of the world a neighborhood. Now, through our moral and ethical commitment, we must make of it a brotherhood. We must all learn to live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools. It simply means that every nation must be concerned about every other nation. Every individual must be concerned about every other individual. Some months ago, Mrs. King and I journeyed over to that great country known as India. And I never will forget the experience of meeting with all the fine people in the villages all over that country. It was a marvelous and noble experience. But I must submit to you this morning that there were those depressing moments. How can one avoid being depressed when he sees with his own eyes millions of people going to bed hungry at night? How can one avoid being depressed when he sees with his own eyes millions of people who can't go to bed at night because they have no houses to go in, they have no beds to sleep in. How can one avoid being depressed when he discovers that out of India's population of 400 million people, more than 360 million make an annual income of less than $90 a year? Most of these people had never seen a doctor or a dentist. As I noticed these conditions, something within me cried out, we in America stand idly by and not be concerned, and an answer came. Oh no, the destiny of India and the destiny of every other nation is tied up with the destiny of the United States, and the destiny of the United States is tied up with the destiny of India. And I started thinking about the fact that right here in America we spend more than $1 million a day to store surplus food. And I found myself saying, I know where we can store that food free of charge. In the wrinkled stomachs of the hundreds and millions of people who go to bed hungry at night. Maybe we spend far too much of our money and the United States establishing military bases around the world rather than bases of genuine concern and understanding. All I'm saying is all life is interrelated. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. As long as there are people in extreme poverty in this world, no man can be totally rich, even if he has $1 billion. As long as this diseases are rampant, and millions of people cannot expect to live more than 28 or 30 years, no man can be totally healthy, even if he just got a checkup from the finest clinic in the nation. Strangely enough, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the way the world is made. This is the interrelated structure of reality. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island atop itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And then he goes on toward the end to say, any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. Therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Now this is a meaning of having a world perspective. If we are to realize the American dream. The other point is we've got to get rid of the notion that there are superior and inferior races. We must make it known all over the world that a doctrine of white supremacy has no basis, and anthropology has no basis in scientific thinking, and has no basis in morality. Now, you know this thing still gets around. People used to argue that the Negro was inferior by nature. And they would go back in the Bible, Pastor Fleming, and they would get up certain passages in the Bible. It's a strange thing how people will use religion often to justify their prejudices. And so they would go back in the Bible and they would say, now, the Negro is inferior by nature because of Noah's curse on the children of Ham. Now, you know there was a great philosopher back in Greek philosophy by the name of Aristotle, who had a great deal to do with setting up formal logic, and he would have what was known as a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. And so one brother during the days of slavery wanted to justify slavery, and he had set his argument up on the framework of Aristotle's thinking. And he would say, now all men are made in the image of God. Then came his minor premise, God, is everybody knows, is not a Negro, and therefore the Negro is not a man. Yes, this is a kind of reasoning that prevailed. But today they don't talk about these things anymore. They talk more now on social and sociological grounds that the Negro is not culturally ready for integration. And that if you integrate too much, and that if you integrate schools, the Negro will pull the right race back a generation. Then they go on to say, you know, that the Negro is inherently criminal and all these things. But these people never say to us that many of these problems are problems of urban dislocation, and that poverty, ignorance, and disease breed crime, whatever the racial group may be, and that these conditions are environmental and not racial, and it is a torturous logic to use the tragic results of segregation and discrimination as an argument for the continuation of it. The thing to do is to get rid of it. So all over America we must make it known that there are no superior and inferior races. Now the basis of what we have to do today must be grounded in love. Yes, love is a very powerful word. You know, people used to ask me about it all the time. They would say, now, Dr. King, now what in the world you mean when you say love these people who are beating on us and bombing our houses and threatening our children? What in the world you mean when you say love such people? And I always have to stop and try to define the meaning of love in this area. And interestingly enough, Greek philosophy comes to our aid at this point. There are 3 words in the Greek language for love. One of them is the word eros. Now, eros is a sort of aesthetic love. Philosopher Plato talks about it a great deal in his dialogues, a yearning of the soul for the realm of divine. It has come to us to mean a sort of romantic love, and so we all know about eros. We've experienced it. We've read about it in the beauties of literature. In a sense, Edgar Allan Poe was talking about eros when he talked about his beautiful Annabel Lee with the love surrounded by the halo of eternity. In a sense, Shakespeare was talking about eros when he said love is not love which alters when alteration finds a bend with the remover to remove. It is an ever fixed mark which looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark. You know, I can remember that because I used to quote it to my wife when we were courting. That's eros. That's eros. Then the Greek language talks about philia, which is another level of love. It is an intimate affection between personal friends. Now on this level we love because we are loved. We love people that we like. This is friendship. Then the Greek language talks about agape. Agape is more than friendship. Agape is not something affectionate. Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill to all men. It is an overflowing love that seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is a love of God operating in the human heart. And so when one rises to love on this level, he loves man not because he likes him, but he loves every man because God loves him. And so he goes on with that. And so he rises to the level of hating the system rather than the individual who is caught up in that system. He loves the person even though he may hate the evil deed. And I believe this is what Jesus meant when he said love your enemies. And I'm so happy that he didn't say like your enemies, because it's pretty difficult to like some people. It's difficult to like people bombing your homes and threatening your children and kicking you about. But Jesus says to love them. Love is greater than like. Love is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill to all men. And I believe with this method In this approach, we will be able to win. Another point is we've got to do it now. We don't have time to wait. We've been waiting for too many years. We must do it right now. The time is always ripe to do right. For years now, we had heard the word wait. It ringed in the ears of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait is almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. We have waited more than 340 years for our God-given and constitutional rights. The nations of Asia and Africa were moving with jet-like speed toward gaining political independence, but we were still moving at horse and buggy pace toward gaining a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. Perhaps it was easy for those who had never felt the sting darts of segregation to say wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will, drown your brothers and sisters at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental skies, and see her beginning to adapt an unconscious bitterness toward white people, when you have to concoct an answer for your 5-year-old son who is asking, Daddy, why do white people treat black people so mean? When you find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When your first name becomes nigger, your middle name becomes boy, how old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly a tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fear and outer resentment, when you are forever fighting a degrading and degenerating sense of somebodyness, then you will understand why we found it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, that you can understand our unavoidable and legitimate concern. You know, one day after finishing school, I was called to a little church down in Montgomery, Alabama. Things were going well there. It was a marvelous experience. A year later, a lady by the name of Rosa Parks decided she wasn't going to take it any longer. She stayed on the bus seat. You may not remember because it was way back now, several years, but it was the beginning of a movement. 50,000 black men and women refused absolutely to ride the city buses, and we walked together for 381 days. That's what Negroes got to learn to do in the North. Negroes got to learn to stick together. We stuck together. We sent out the call. No Negro rode the buses. It was one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen in my life. The people of Montgomery asked me to serve as the spokesman. And as the president of the new organization, the Montgomery Improvement Association, that came into being to lead the boycott, I couldn't say no. Then we started our struggle together. Things were going well, but then about 10 or 15 days later, after the white people in Montgomery knew that we meant business, they started doing some nasty things. They started making nasty telephone calls, and it came to the point where some days more than 40 telephone calls would come in, threatening my life, the life of my family, the life of my children. I took it for a while in a strong manner, but I never will forget one night, very late. It was around midnight. You can have some strange experiences at midnight. Yes, the telephone started ringing, and I picked it up. And on the other end was an ugly voice. That voice said to me in substance, "Nigger, we're tired of you and your mess now. If you aren't out of this town in 3 days, we're going to blow your brains out and blow up your house." Now, I'd heard these things before, but for some reason that night it got to me. I turned over and I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. I was frustrated, bewildered. Now I got up and went into the kitchen to warm up some coffee, thinking that coffee would give me a little relief. And I started thinking about many things. I pulled back on the theology and the philosophy that I had just studied in the universities, trying to give theological and philosophical reasons for the existence and the reality of sin and evil, but the answer didn't quite come there. I started thinking about a beautiful little daughter who had just been born about a month earlier. We have 4 children now, but we only had 1 then. She was the darling of my life. I'd come in night after night and see that little gentle smile. And I sat at that table and thought about that little girl and the fact that she could be taken away from me in a minute. I started thinking about a dedicated, devoted, and loyal wife who was over there asleep. She could be taken from me, I could be taken from her. And I got to the point where I couldn't take it any longer. I was weak. Something said to me, "You can't call on Daddy now. He's up in Atlanta 175 miles away. You can't even call on Mama now. You've got to call on that something and that person that your daddy used to tell you about. That power that can make a way out of no way." And I discovered then that religion had to become real to me, and I had to know God for myself. And I bowed down over that cup of coffee. I never will forget it. And I prayed a prayer, and I prayed out loud that night. I said, "Lord, I'm down here trying to do what is right. I think I'm right. I think the cause that we represent is right. But Lord, I must confess that I'm weak now. I'm faltering. I'm losing my courage. And I can't let the people see me like this. Because if they see me weak and losing my courage, they will begin to get weak." It seems at that moment, I could hear another voice saying to me, "Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for truth. Stand up for justice, and lo, I will be with you even until the end of the world." Well, I'll tell you, I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roar. I've felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus saying still to fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. And I'm going on in believing in him. You better know him and know his name and know how to call his name. Don't be a fool. Recognize your dependence on God. Centuries ago, Jeremiah raised a question. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? He raised it because he saw the good people suffering so often and the evil people prospering. Centuries later, our slave foreparents came along, and they too saw the injustice of life and had nothing to look forward to morning after morning but the rawhide whip of the overseer, long rows of cotton in the sizzling heat. But they did an amazing thing. They reached back across the centuries and they took Jeremiah's question mark and straightened it into an exclamation point, and they could sing, there is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. There's another stanza that I like so well. Sometimes I feel discouraged. And I don't mind telling you this morning that sometimes I feel discouraged. I felt discouraged in Chicago. And as I move through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, I feel discouraged sometimes. Living every day under the threat of death, I feel discouraged sometimes. Living every day under extensive criticisms, even from Negroes, I feel discouraged sometimes. Yes, sometimes I feel discouraged and feel my works in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. This morning as I close, I want to take you back to 1963. As we celebrate this 50-year anniversary, 1/2 century later, I was honored to be the culminating speaker that day in Washington. The 28th day of August, it was a hot summer afternoon. 250,000 people gathered on the National Mall, and we were marching for jobs and freedom. And as I stepped on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial that day, these are the words that I said. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My 4 little children one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America's to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.